many of the countries in the region would have burned to the ground in the fires set by ISIS and Daesh. Have you seen, do you recall the steadfast stories of heroic fights against terrorism through Hollywood-like generated reports in the news media? Have you seen the 25 million strong funeral of the late commander, General Qasem Soleimani, throughout Iran? Those were censored throughout the world in the West. The terrorist act of his assassination was a prize given to Daesh on a silver platter, whom according to certain American officials, had confessed that ISIS was an American creation. His killing, his martyrdom, was a gift to that same ISIS. Instead of recognizing him for his sacrifices, he's assassinated. Why? But the Islamic Republic of Iran, through the use of all tools and capacities in order to bring to justice the perpetrators and all those who had a hand in this government-sanctioned act of terror, will not sit until that is done. The blood of the oppressed will not be forgotten, and the robes of the guilty will bring them to justice. Ladies and gentlemen, dear heads of states, representatives, most serious threats in West Asia are extremism and fundamentalism. The eradication of terrorism through an all-encompassing fight against their very roots and the very reasons that gave rise to them throughout the world will not be achieved. The surgical use of terrorists by certain Western governments as a political tool will be overcome by the collective will of the people of the region. Certain intelligence and security services of Western countries, in a very targeted fashion, moving terrorists from area to area in the region in order to be able to capitalize on their devastating capacities. They keep being asked, why have you given refuge again and again to officially recognized terror groups who have the blood of over 17,000 Iranian martyrs on their hands, as well as our head of state, prime minister, and congressional representatives? Why do the Europeans behave in this way? They must give a reasonable answer. Why do they say and portray that they're fighting against terror, however they give refuge to terrorists? This is a double standard. Discrimination in the fight against terrorism is a green light given to terrorists themselves. Iran, who herself has been the biggest target of terrorists, has been at the forefront of fighting terrorism in the region. The people of the region see Iran as a secure partner for their own security, and the occupying regime in Jerusalem is seen as a perpetrator of much of the violence in the region. Has the time not come to bring an end to 7.5 decades of the occupation of Palestinian lands, of the demolition of their homes, of the blood of their women and children, and for the people of Palestine to be recognized officially as a country? The continuation of the occupation of the Zionist regime of certain Syrian and Lebanese and Palestinian territories, and the lack of recognition to the people of Palestine has been a negation of their inherent rights. And the lack of formulation of a proper Palestinian government with its rightful capital in Jerusalem has been a tool used at the hand of certain governments in the region. Certain foundations that have been laid in the region by certain countries based on lies and destruction and occupation, those countries cannot be partners for peace. The situation today in Afghanistan represents another example of foreign meddling in the region, which has led to the killing of over 70,000 men, women, and children. In Afghanistan, Iran insists on an all-encompassing government with the participation of all Afghan groups and population, but the assistance of the world is needed in order to address the crisis of refugees who have been driven from their land, from Afghanistan, a great many of whom are being given refuge in Islamic Iran today. Vis-a-vis the Ukrainian crisis and the war, I would like to remind everyone again of our position, unambiguous position. As the Islamic Republic, we do not stand nor support any war anywhere, not in Europe nor anywhere else. We do not see any war to benefit any sides in Europe. Any type of tension and fanning the flames of violence in Ukraine has been done by the United States of America in order to weaken the European countries. And this is a long-term plan, unfortunately. We support any initiative for a cessation of hostilities and the war, and support any political measure. We fully announce our support for such initiative. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the Americans leaving the JCPOA showed an official trampling upon their commitments by that government. It was an inappropriate response to our fulfillment of commitments within that framework by having broken the agreement within the framework of Resolution 2231 passed by the UN Security Council. It has committed egregious and unilateral crime in the international arena. The United States of America must explain transparently and demonstrate in a verifiable fashion that it does wish to reach a proper conclusion and show her commitment and choose a way, choose a path, either JCPOA or not. And whether the European countries, by the same token, who ignore Resolution UN Security Council Resolution 2231 and their commitments within the framework of the JCPOA, they will ultimately lose on this path. Rest assured that nuclear weapons have no place in the defensive doctrine and the military doctrine of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The international organizations, multiple official reports have stated as much. The Islamic Republic of Iran, as 2 decades ago, will never fall short of obtaining the inherent right of the Iranian nation to have peaceful nuclear energy. Not only we have lived up to our commitments, but unfortunately the United States not only doesn't adhere to her commitments within any framework of international treaties such as the NPT, but it does impose sanctions with that excuse as a political tool on people such as the people of Iran. But I am saying today that these sanctions have not yielded the desired results. It is time now for the United States to bring a cessation to her traveling on the wrong path and choose the right side. Ladies and gentlemen, humanity is entering a new framework. Old powers will keep their current downward trajectory. They are the past and we are the future. I repeat once again, they represent the past and we represent the future. We are the future. Our viewpoint towards the future is one of hope. The world awaits the day that has been promised by all faiths throughout the world, by all Abrahamic faiths, that ultimate seeker of justice does exist. We do believe that according to divine will, just as divine prophets have promised, justice and fairness will overtake the world. And the rule of the sincere people, those who truly follow the path of the omnipotent, will reverberate throughout the world. A world that rejects ignorance. The world awaits the day in which the old path will come to an end. I do thank you for all of your attention and your presence here today. May the blessings of the omnipotent be upon you and your loved ones.
The Assembly would like to thank the President of the Islamic Republic of Iran for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Abdelmajid Tebboune, President of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, it is my honor to welcome His Excellency Abdelmajid Tebboune, President of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
In the name of God, the compassionate, may peace be with the messengers. Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, Excellency, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me on this occasion to greet all the heads of state and delegations that are participating in the 78th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. I also would like to congratulate Mr. Denis Francis for his appointment, election to be the president of the session, and I wish him every success in this noble task. I also want to thank Mr. Chaba Koroshi, president of the previous session, for his outstanding work. I would sincerely thank the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, and I would like to express my wholehearted support for the efforts that he has undertaken to strengthen the role of our organization and to promote it in order to respond to the aspirations of our peoples. Mr. President, we are here in this global hall that welcomes the entire world with all its differences and diversity, and we are here. We hope to promote dialogue and discussion amongst us and to make this hall a true basis for making the world a world of cooperation, solidarity, and equality among nations. My country, and this is the case for over 50 years from this noble tribune, has pointed to the dysfunctioning of the global order and has pointed the way towards correcting this global order in order to achieve greater equality among our member states. Mr. President, the conflicts and crises in our world have reached unprecedented levels. Millions of people have been displaced, and international relations have been transformed from ties of cooperation and consensus to conflict, and this has threatened international organizations in the midst of a world that is experiencing emergencies under extreme pressure. In the face of these difficult situations and multiple crises, the weakening of the role of the Security Council over the past few years is evident. This is a role that is set out in the Charter of the United Nations. That role is to maintain international peace and security, and in particular by preventing the use of force and by tackling the causes that threaten peace, international peace and security by ensuring a peaceful resolution of conflicts. I think the time has come for all of us to reflect together, to uphold the principles and goals of the UN Charter, and to strengthen our common engagement, and to establish a sound framework for strengthening international cooperation, making it more effective, and especially on major issues. The goal should be to consolidate international peace and security and to achieve the sustainable development goals in a multipolar world. Following this logic, Algeria, which is preparing itself to be a non-permanent member of the Security Council and aware of the responsibility that is incumbent on us, especially in the face of the challenges that the international community is facing. Bearing all that in mind, I want to take this opportunity to once again express my gratitude to the 184 member states who voted in favor of Algeria to be a non-permanent member. This is an expression of trust that Algeria will seek to justify and uphold throughout its term in the Security Council. We are ready to strengthen cooperation with all member states on the Security Council and in the UN as a whole. We also are ready to take advantage of our extensive experience in mediation and seeking political solutions to peacefully resolve conflicts. Very much in this spirit, my country will sit on the Security Council, bringing with it the aspirations of the African continent and the Arab world, and calling for overcoming conflicts and focusing on lasting solutions to conflicts by dealing with the root causes of these conflicts. Mr. President, any effort to strengthen joint international action forces us to respond to the constant appeals to strengthen the multilateral system by reforming the main organs of our organization in order to make them more transparent and ensure the necessary balance among the main organs and ensure equitable geographical distribution, and thus revitalize the central role of the General Assembly as the only organ which truly reflects the diversity of our international community. This is a key element in strengthening equality among states and strengthening the pillar of a true democracy. Also, to make progress on intergovernmental negotiations on reforming the Security Council is essential, based on an inclusive and comprehensive approach. This should be an absolute priority for the international community in order to find a consensus and to implement a true reform that ensures greater representation and transparency. And here I reiterate the commitment of Algeria with regard to the common African position and the need to put an end to the historic injustice against the African continent. Mr. President, Algeria is aware of the price of freedom. We will never abandon just causes, and we will always support oppressed peoples who are fighting for their freedom. This is why we have always supported the Palestinian cause, in order to allow the brethren Palestinian people to exercise their inalienable rights and to establish their own independent states based on the 4th of June 1967 borders with Jerusalem as the capital in conformity with the international resolutions and international law. As part of our support for the Palestinian cause, which is a just cause, last year my country, under my own personal supervision, held a summit to bring together the various Palestinian factions at a summit which was crowned with the adoption of the Algiers Declaration. In this context, I would like to reiterate our attachment to the Arab Initiative, Peace Initiative, as a framework for resolving the Palestinian issue and putting an end to the occupation, which is the main cause of instability in the Middle East region. I want to appeal to the conscience of the international community to assume its moral and historical responsibility and allow the Palestinian people to regain their rights and decide on their future. Furthermore, I would like to take this opportunity to call on the International Court of Justice to follow up on the request formulated by the UN General Assembly on the 30th of December of 2022 by giving an advisory opinion regarding the Israeli practices that affect human rights on occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem. We aspire to towards a victory and to honor the combat of the Palestinian people who have suffered so much and who have sacrificed so much living under occupation. And from this tribune, I also call on the Security Council to adopt a resolution pursuant to which it would guarantee the two-state solution, which enjoys a consensus from the international community, and by virtue of which it would be possible to put an end to the unilateral practices of the occupying authority, starting with the activity of settlement building on occupied Palestinian territory.
We once again call on, and I insist on, the need for an extraordinary session of the General Assembly to grant the State of Palestine a status of full-fledged member. And I repeat, we call once again for an extraordinary session in order to grant the State of Palestine the status of permanent member within the United Nations General Assembly. We are proud that what our organization has accomplished in terms of decolonization in a number of regions, and we aspire to a definitive solution and putting an end to the colonization with the last African colony, because indeed an entire people in Western Sahara is deprived of its fundamental right to self-determination, and it is necessary to organize a free and comprehensive referendum under the rules adopted by the Security Council in 1991. This was approved by both parties, and it's time to implement it. It's waiting for that. Given that reality, and given attempts geared to creating legitimacy based on illegitimacy, it is incumbent on the United Nations to preserve the credibility of these resolutions and to support full and complete implementation of the resolutions of our organization and preserve its reputation. In that context, I would reiterate here our support for the Secretary General's efforts, those of the Secretary General of the United Nations and his staff, efforts undertaken to relaunch the negotiating process, direct negotiations, and to organize a referendum to allow the Sahrawi people to self-determination according to the Security Council resolutions. Mr. President, my country is closely following, and with great concern, what is occurring in some countries, friendly nations, sister nations, and we are undertaking every effort in order to find peaceful solutions and to bring points of view and positions closer together. Turning now to the situation in Libya, brother nation. Here, I reiterate our support to the United Nations efforts in order to find a political solution led by the Libyan people themselves and allowing them to preserve the unity of Libya, its sovereignty, and its territorial integrity. Turning to the situation in Mali. Algeria plays a lead role in the area of international mediation and presides the follow-up committee for implementation of the peace agreement and peace and reconciliation agreement in the Algiers process, is resolute in its efforts to overcome the obstacles in that sister nation. And here we reiterate our position, which is refusing resorting to force in order to settle conflicts. With regard to developments in Niger, a neighboring country, Algeria reiterates its attachment to the return to a constitutional order through peaceful means and to make sure that diplomatic and political solutions prevail while respecting the rule of law. We call for vigilance, given the intentions of foreign intervention, military intervention, because this could have dangerous repercussions on peace and stability in Nigeria and in the region as a whole. At the same time, the very concerning situation in Sudan calls upon us to call on all parties to the conflict to put an end to it and to pursue dialogue, put an end to the fighting. This situation has very serious repercussions on the humanitarian situation in that country. This vulnerable and unstable situation is casting a shadow over the entire Sahel region and the Sahara region. Its development has been stopped, and it is now experiencing famine. And turning to the issue of climate change, this is further exacerbating instability and is fueling terrorist groups who are making this region one that they use as a base for their criminal activities. In that context, Algeria will spare no efforts to support development in the region, and we are prepared to share our experience in the area of combating terrorism and extreme violent extremism. And we would like to participate in an extraordinary session, and the 16th extraordinary session of the African Union in Malibu in 2022 in that regard. And as a coordinator for fighting terrorism and violent extremism in Africa, we presented a report at that time. This report looked at the development of terrorist threats throughout Africa and mechanisms to address those threats. This is a report that is being looked at a number of different practical mechanisms to strengthen the fight against terrorism in Africa. It also underscores the importance of putting the fight against terrorism as a priority, and one that requires common African action. Moreover, I'd like to look at Algeria's contribution as an international mediator is not confined just to the African continent and our region. We also participate in the Arab Contact Group's efforts geared to relaunching the negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Mr. President, 8 years after the adoption of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and the Addis Ababa Plan of Action, a number of states that are currently developing face challenges. And this means they need more solidarity from the international community in order to achieve a better world and to have a more equitable and effective economic model, which would make it possible to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Algeria adopted the Sustainable Development Program and has made it a national priority and has integrated it into all the plans, strategies, and programs that were launched by the government.